This pile of rocks at the bottom of Tinker's Creek Gorge is a mystery. Or rather, it was a mystery until Thursday. I'm Darren, and this is the Industrial Revolution. I found this pile of rocks initially hiking up Tinker's Creek here in the Bedford Reservation. It's part of the Cleveland Metro Park system. And it's a really great hike. It's actually one of my favorite summer hikes. You end up in the water a lot. On a really hot summer day, it's very refreshing. And when you get up near the end, you end up seeing this off to the side. And you kind of wonder what it is. It certainly looks like a dam. If you look at it, it starts off with rock and goes up a ways, and then a little ways further up, the rock is covered in dirt. The rock here, as you can see, is just rough cut sandstone. Nothing terribly special about it, but it doesn't go that way at all towards the creek. And that kind of makes no sense when you think about it. Why would somebody build half a dam? And if they built the whole dam, what happened to the other half of the dam? Well, on Thursday, after some digging, I finally found out the answer to that question. And it came from one of the Cleveland Metro Park historians who had a fragment of a map from 1874. And on that map, it listed Old Woolen Fap, just across the stream here. And that led me to look at a slightly older map, and it had a 1858 map that showed SC Powers W Fap. We're assuming here that FAC means factory. Well, now I had a name, SC Powers, and it had a rough time frame. I knew that in 1858 it was actually not referred to as the old mill, and in 1874 it was. That led me to dig a little bit more, and looking at the only maps I could find before and after, this area wasn't developed much. And what I discovered is that SC Powers is Stephen C. Powers. I lived in Bedford, which is about a half mile upstream here, where there's a lot of mills. He actually owned another mill up there as well. So as we head down along the reservoir here for Powers Mill, you might wonder, why would this guy living and working near Bedford, Ohio, which has a really nice waterfall with a really big drop, that already has mills and stuff up there by that drop, a much bigger drop than you have off the dam that's up here in front of us now. Why would Powers, or really any rational person, carve a road down to the bottom of this gorge through the stone, build this dam of stone and dirt, dig out the reservoir behind it, so you could build down here instead of simply taking the far bigger space that he has, so a far bigger drop in water that he'd have available up at the top of the gorge, up by the falls. And it's not a simple answer. He actually did have a mill up just upriver from the falls that he operated, but there's a problem. Tinker's Creek is not huge, and if you go upriver to where these other mills were, they were actually using 100% of the water already. There was simply no water left. In fact, they wanted more than 100% of the water at times. They had an early municipal power station up there, and it could only operate at night when the mills weren't running because there was no water left. So he came down here and he built this dam which originally, of course, kept going all the way over here to that far stone wall, all the way across the creek. And that meant that the creek you see here, this is Tinker's Creek, he got to use all of this. 100% of the water that came down Tinker's Creek was stopped behind his dam. And since it was stopped behind his dam, he got to use 100%. He was able to use as much of it as he wanted. He had a smaller drop, but he had a far higher volume, and owning the property on both sides, that meant that he didn't have to share the water with anyone else. So the water today is a little bit higher than I've seen it at times. There are times, of course, when this is lower. We've had some rain here lately. But by setting up a large enough dam and a reservoir, that ensured that you had plenty of power to operate your mills, and you didn't have to fight with anyone else for that resource. So he came down here and he built this dam. It's a very crude dam in a way. Just huge chunks of rough cut stone that he just pulled off the walls here, and just buried it in dirt to make it kind of waterproof. Sort of waterproof-ish, you might say. And this happened in 1842. He built down here a sawmill and a woolen factory. The sawmill didn't last as long. The woolen factory, though, ran about 15 years before it finally shut down. So everybody knows what a sawmill is. And we tried to find out what exactly a woolen factory is. So if you're familiar with the process for wool, you walk your sheep into one side of the factory and they come out sheared on the other side along with a clothesline full of sweaters, right? Well, that works in cartoons. It doesn't work so well in real life. The process really is that the farmers will shear the sheep or pay somebody to come in and shear the sheep, and they produce fleeces. The fleece is all the wool off of a single sheep. If you're sending that out, you'll get it cleaned, take off sticks and weeds, and what can euphemistically be called organic matter. Let's just say sheep don't necessarily have the best hygiene, especially when they have their wool at their longest in the spring when they're sheared. And then you go into a process called carding. Now, carding takes the wool and going through hooks in opposite directions, it straightens it out. It does a little bit more cleaning, but it gets all the hairs from the wool kind of pointed in the same direction instead of all being sort of knotted up. And in a carding machine, as opposed to a hand carding system, in a carding machine you run a series of rollers that are running, and those ran off water power. In the mid-1700s, good water-powered carding machines were invented. And now you have all this wool. It's relatively clean. Everything's nice and lined up, and it's ready for spinning. Spinning is where you take it and you twist it and pull it and get anything from a really, really thin, fine thread up to a really thick, fluffy yarn. And you can control what you get by how much tension you put on it and how much you twist it in the process. And spinning machines also were invented in the mid-1700s, so they were certainly available. And now you have yarn or thread or whatever you're making in between. And then you move on to looms and weaving. Hand looms have been around forever, as long as people wanted to wear clothes made of textiles. But the mechanical looms, you guessed it, mid-1700s. You had water-powered mechanical looms invented. So what did they actually do here? Well, I tried to find out if there's a term that really apply, what does woolen factory mean? And talking with some historians and talking with some weavers that work with historical weaving, nobody had an answer. The thing we know, if they just did the carding, that first step after you clean it, it would have been called a carding mill. And there's a carding mill here in town. If it just did the weaving, probably would have been called a textile mill. So by calling it a woolen mill, that sort of implies they did 2 or 3 of those steps. And now, how big of an operation was it? Well, that was another mystery. Had no pictures of it. We had nothing for it. What we do know is if you go downriver here, go down about 5 miles or so, you hit the Ohio and Erie Canal. The Ohio and Erie Canal, if you don't know, was an interstate highway. It was very popular. It was heavily traveled in the mid-1800s. It allowed commerce to get from really Lake Erie down to the Ohio River, then all the way over the Mississippi or up to Pittsburgh. So you could ship anything through that. And certainly they would have shipped both fleeces to a woolen factory, and from the factory they would have shipped out the finished goods, whether that was thread or cloth. They could have shipped that. So it's a great place for it. This is about the last place where you really have enough drop to get good power. It's also pretty close to the city of Bedford. So what exactly did they do? Well, again, we don't know. So we do know the sawmill didn't last the whole 15 years, and that was fairly common. When your town is first being established, you make a lot of sawmills. Everyone needs to build a house. All the farmers are building barns. You're building stores. You need a lot of lumber when your town is first being established. Once your town's established, on the other hand, you don't really need so much lumber. So a lot of times sawmills would convert over to grist mills. So you might start a town with a sawmill and then it converts to a grist mill. Or maybe you start with a couple of sawmills and one of them converts over to a grist mill, or you just build it knowing you're going to convert it and make it a grist mill from start. One thing that would have helped was if we had any photos. And, well, until about an hour ago, we didn't have any photos either. Part of the problem is, I said until Thursday, nobody that knew this place existed knew the name on it. And that meant it was really impossible to find anything. People that knew the name on it thought it was a mill upstream, upriver of the falls, actually. So that didn't help because he had another mill up there. But fortunately, about an hour ago, I discovered some photos. These photos are not taken while things were actually in operation. You might notice that the walls are a little bit iffy, that building in the front not doing so well. So on the historic map, what we saw was that there were 3 buildings and a good mill race. So we knew sawmill, we knew woolen factory, we knew water-powered dam, mill race, 10-foot high dam here. So you had really a pretty substantial amount of water. He was able to use all the water from Tinker's Creek, which upriver of here pulled out just above the falls, ran at times 4, 5, 6 mills. So we had lots of water power down here. Now, when I found some historic photos, though, the photos actually showed, well, one of them showed 1 building, and the other showed 2 buildings. Neither of these are in very good shape. You'll notice the walls are kind of buckling here and they're about to fall over. Well, I hiked down here today after I left the Historical Society, and trying to see what was here, and I knew about this part, but I hadn't ever seen anything on the other side. I didn't know anything was on the other side. So I walked over there, waded across the creek, and this is what I found. If you look at this stone wall, and you see the way it's sloped, and you see the cornering on it there, Well, there's a trail that goes up it today. Uh, Pretty sure this was part of the tail race. The tail race is the outlet water from your mill. So it's after it goes through your water wheel or your turbine. It goes from the bottom of the turbine to the water wheel through the tail race back out to the stream. And given where this is located, pretty sure this is a tail race. And that's all I found. It's summer, so there's a lot of undergrowth. There might be more if you come back here in the winter. Unfortunately, we still don't know everything about this site. We know a lot more than we did a week ago, that's for sure. We now know it's not a random mystery dam. We know it's a dam that was built in 1842 by Stephen C. Powers. We know on the other side of the creek here was a sawmill, a woolen mill. We know 15 years later the site was abandoned. And we know that half the dam was taken away and the stones probably carried up the hill on the other side. Probably used in buildings over in Bedford today. So places like this, they do have a story. You may not know what it is, but with a little work, maybe you can find out. And maybe you'll find out that these mystery places are the Industrial Revolution. Hey, wait, don't go yet. Don't go. I need some help. To keep this channel growing, I really do need you to help out. And the easiest way you can do that is just to like this video. Just hit like on YouTube, and that tells YouTube that this video is worth watching. You can also subscribe and hit notify. That'll tell YouTube the whole channel is worth watching. And you'll see this pop up in your feed when you go into YouTube, so you can watch my new videos when they come out. I also have a Patreon page over at patreon.com/Industrial Revolution. So you can go help out over there. That'd be great, just a few bucks a month. And thanks for stopping and watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you for the next one.